Welcome to the second episode of the Shyburn podcast. As many of you know, we're a software company, but we've always really prided ourselves on taking people seriously. So in this series, we explore topics around technology, but actually most of our interviews are about people and how we can build outstanding work cultures. Today's guest, René Carayol, is one of the best people that I could be sitting down and speaking to when it comes to people. He's coached some of the top leaders in the world and worked with so many different companies. He's a man full of great stories, so I'm very privileged to have him with us here today to tell us some of those stories. René, welcome.
It's fabulous to be here, Yasmin. And it's great to be back in Malta. It's really interesting that the years I've been coming, I've seen Malta change. It's becoming so much more diverse, which for me is important. It's great. I wonder how inclusive it is.
You've gone straight in there, René. Malta has changed, as you said, over the years, and I think this is something that we're all struggling with, and I know it's something that you have a lot of experience with. How do we make that transition from diversity to inclusion?
Everywhere we go, surprisingly, importantly, instructively, business is taking the lead. Now, I'm quite surprised at that, because normally societal change would expect it to come from public sector, the charities, the think tanks, government, public policy, maybe even the social activists. But what we're seeing, curiously, and maybe brilliantly, in three of the big social changes of our time, sustainability, climate change, and inclusion, business is leading. So we're quite privileged, me and my team are privileged. We work in the rarefied atmosphere of the chief executive's corner office and their team, the executives. We tend to get called in when their diversity programs are beginning to fail. They've decided that there's a gender imbalance. They need to do something about disability, about faith, about LGBTQ, or ethnicity. Whichever is the driver, they're keen to get a better balance. For all the right reasons, with the heart in the right place, but maybe not that experienced, and maybe more ambitious than they're capable of. And we see lots of changes to recruitment, lots of changes to advancement, lots of removal of filters, and we can feel the changes more or less immediately. The one bit that's missing, the environment hasn't changed to support those who come from different backgrounds. Inclusion.
Is it really something that you're seeing that CEOs from within are saying, like, what is the pain point that is making them realize that change is needed? Because I get some people asking me sometimes, is it legislation that's forcing CEOs to change, or is there an organic?
It's not legislation. I wish it was totally organic. It is at times. We're seeing some strange things, but very powerful. The internal lobby from colleagues, especially a younger generation. The demanding to live in a different world. Women have found their voices recently. Very powerful. We see some of the more new managers who want a different world. It was so tough for them to get to where they've got to. They don't want others to go through what they had to get there. But you know the strangest one and maybe the most powerful for the chief executives? It's their own children at home who are challenging them in a way that perhaps their colleagues at work can't. Who are having debates, have got points of view that won't be denied. And they're fresh, they're powerful, and they're able to say things at a proximity with a passion that maybe is not in the office. That's a huge driver. And what that creates is not someone who wants to come and change everything. It's someone who's curious. And that intellectual curiosity is all we need. They come and ask questions. Why doesn't this happen? Why the pay gap? Why have we got this? Why have we got that? They may not be looking for the resolution. They want to understand, how have we got to where we've got to? Wow, that creates an environment that we can have the conversations we've never had before. Challenges, colleagues in the workforce need to be brave enough to find their voice. And whenever we get called in, and what normally happens, it's normally the same everywhere. They've tried some basic diversity. It started to pay off. The entry level of the workforce starts to look a little different. And there's lots of joy and happiness that it's working, and so there should be. Then one of two things happens. They realise that the level above that, there's no change. Or people they recruit in start to resign. I don't think I can thrive in this environment. I'm never going to make it to the top. I'm not going to be treated like that. This is, you need me, but you don't want me. And that's what we hear a lot of. You need my capability, but you never make me feel as though you want me. If we can expose that to the chief executive, big change happens. But 9 times out of 10, that's hidden from them by the layers within the organisation. Our job is to bring that and not confront them, but enable them to experience it. So a line I don't want our listeners to forget. No one ever appreciates the power of inclusion until they experience exclusion. And normally the top of the business maybe have never been excluded in their lives. So we've got to create an environment where they can experience it, simulate it, taste. And the best way, create opportunities for them to talk to people from different backgrounds. And sometimes magic happens. So first story. We had the privilege of coaching a guy called Richard Smith. He's the chief executive of Unite Students, who provide the student accommodation for many of the UK's leading universities. So their clients, the students, are extremely diverse, because many of those staying in student accommodation have come from abroad. On a particular Saturday night, May 2020, Richard lives in Bristol. The head office of Unite Students is in Bristol, in the west of England. He's at home with his 2 teenage sons. They're watching TV. And right into their lounge comes the tragic live murder of George Floyd on their TV. 9 minutes, 29 excruciating seconds. They didn't expect it. None of us expected it. It was horrific. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They couldn't move. When it finished, they didn't have the dinner they'd planned. They all just went to their bedrooms, alone, without saying a word. Richard couldn't sleep. 5 o'clock he got up. The whole of Bristol was under the lockdown of the pandemic. He got up, got dressed, showered, shaved, got in his car, drove to work, even knowing the offices were locked. He just needed to get out. He needed to breathe again. He arrives at the offices, got the key, opens the key, sits at his desk, there's no one else in. He opens his laptop and he starts typing. It's a stream of consciousness. It's not prose, it's maybe not even coherent, but it's what he was feeling. He needed to get it out. He is human too. He just experienced exclusion. Leaning back, he pressed send. It went to all of his 5,000 colleagues in the business. He'd even left his mobile number on the bottom, but he felt relief. 2 minutes later, his mobile phone rings. He picks it up. It's Denzel. Denzel works in the Leeds depot in security. Denzel is of Afro-Caribbean descent. He'd just read the email from Richard. He dialed to leave a message on the voicemail. He never expected In his life to be speaking to the chief executive. Richard never expected to be speaking to Denzel, who works in security. Denzel said, I didn't know I'd get through to you. I just wanted to say thank you. I never knew anyone would feel the way I feel, especially the chief executive. Thank you. Thank you. That's how I was feeling. That's how I am feeling. Richard thanked Denzel, didn't really know what to say. They had a bit of a clumsy conversation. After a few minutes, Richard said, well, thank you very much, Denzel. It's been great to talk to you. He said politely, is there anything I can do for you? And Denzel said, no, thank you. It was great to talk to you. There is one thing, Richard. Maybe it's a very trivial, silly thing. But in my job as security, every morning, first thing, I have to pick up the keys. And there's a master key, and there's a slave key. I just have an issue with the word slave. My colleagues tell me, get over yourself, from Denzel. It's trivial, just get over yourself. I can't get over myself. For the 27 years I've worked here, it still troubles me. In an instant, Richard said, with immediate effect, we're going to change them to primary key, secondary key. I'll send a note out today. That is changing with immediate effect. Denzel was holding the tears back. He'd become really emotional. Someone cared, someone understood. Someone's prepared to do something on his behalf. It wasn't trivial to Richard. They put the phone down. In that moment, Richard realised he needs to get out of his office and spend more time with people who aren't like him. He needs to walk in their shoes. He needs to understand what it feels like to come from a different background. Denzel also realised after the phone call he needed to find the courage to speak up and speak out. In that moment, the culture of Unite Students changed.
As you're sharing that story, I can just think safety. Yes. You created a safe container for two people to come together.
It's creating a safe space. And it's not complex. It takes intent. There are many of our colleagues who don't feel they have permission to speak up. They accept inappropriate behaviour all the time and never say a word. And most of us never notice. Richard noticed. Richard cared. We can all be a Richard. There's that colleague from a different background who doesn't believe she has a voice. She accepts inappropriate. Let's speak out for her. Let's speak up for her. This is allyship. Let's notice when one of our colleagues from a different background is very quiet, isn't saying anything, or leaves a little early every day. Let's create a safe space where they might be able to talk to us. And even if all we bring is a sympathetic ear, we've done them so much. If we can act on their behalf, we've done them so much. If we can change the environment so that doesn't happen again, this is inclusive leadership. This is inclusion. But everything starts with that safe space. And we probably spend our first 15 minutes every time we walk into the executive suite or the boardroom creating that safe space. And when you get it, you get a return on investment you could never expect. Voices from those who have never thought they had a voice before. Sharing the simple things that disable, that others have done inadvertently, that we can fix very easily. Second story. We're invited by Deutsche Telekom, the global heavyweight telecom company. 100 billion euro business, 100,000 employees around the world, based out of Cologne in Germany. Tim, the chief executive, hadn't met with his 60 direct reports, 60 direct reports, you know it makes sense. Each one of them was a country manager, a country CEO. Not met with them for 3 years. So the first time they're coming face to face for a full day in Cologne, they invited us and gave us the first 3 hours, which tells you we were going to focus on inclusion. Something was going wrong. And what was going wrong in a business that was German heritage? Those near the top of the company who weren't German were leaving. They didn't feel they could ever ascend to the top position. Something needed to change. So we're given 3 hours. We asked if we could have 2 colleagues who were more junior to come in that I could interview, and they could share what it's like from their view of the world. And we asked for 2 with completely different backgrounds. So I get in, I'm going to say, it's so noisy. These guys haven't met each other for a long time. They're backstage, they're chatting, they're on their phones. I need a safe space to bring this more junior members of the team into. I asked them, can you put your laptops away, put your phones away, can I have your undivided attention? They just ignored me. In fact, it got louder. So I came off the stage, stood in front of Tim, the chief executive, and said, Tim, I need your undivided attention. I need you to listen intensely. I need you to help me create a safe space. Respect everyone who comes in here. Tim closed his mobile, turned it off and put it in his pocket. He closed the laptop, put it under his seat. The whole room did the same. A few kept talking. I walked over and challenged them. I had an incredible silence. I had their undivided attention. It had become safe. The first interviewee came in. He was so nervous. His jacket had been buttoned up the wrong way and up to the top, and he came in looking at the ceiling. I had a bit of a conversation. We calmed him down. He started to talk, and you could feel the room wanting to support him, wanting to encourage him, creating a safe space. I said, so tell me a little bit about yourself. He said, I've been with the company 17 years. It's a fantastic company to work for. I could not work for a better business. It's brilliant. Anything not so great? A very small thing. I'm 3rd generation Pakistani. Said, I was born in Germany. I'm a German citizen, as are my parents. But our great-grandparents came from Pakistan many years ago. I'm proud of that descent, but I'm proudly German. When I walk around the business, on some special days, I just think I would like a private space to just say a prayer. I've never found that private space. I've never asked, because I feel that if I ask, it might be taken the wrong way. So I've just never said anything. In fact, today, I feel a little awkward saying it, but I feel that I can. So I asked the audience, how does that make you feel? They all told me how it made them think. I pushed them back. I didn't ask you that. How does that make you feel? And one of the few women in the room stood up and she said, I get involved in nearly all the office moves. I've never had a request for a prayer space or a prayer room. I've never thought about it. I've never considered it. It's never been mentioned. But in actual fact, we could find that space really easily. I have just never thought about it. I'm embarrassed to say, I've never thought about it. At that moment, one of their colleagues stood up really quickly. I want to add something. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I feel that I can today. He was the chief executive of the Turkish business, the Deutsche Telekom Turkish business. I've been with the company for some 25 years. It's a brilliant company. I love working here. I'm third generation German, but my great-grandfather came from Turkey many years ago. It's great to work here, but when there's a terrorist incident anywhere in Germany, I get uninvited from meetings. People don't speak to me at the coffee machine. I become invisible. In my private life, my wife and I get uninvited from dinner parties. The neighbours don't speak to us. I honestly don't know why. What have we done? After 6 to 8 weeks, everything goes back to normal. They talk to me again, but they don't know how they've made me feel. They don't know how empty and how hurtful and how disappointing that makes me feel. The place went silent. I don't think he even realised he'd said that. The sweat was breaking out around him. He sat down. I asked everyone, how does that make you feel? And one of his colleagues jumped up and shouted, ashamed. I let it rinse through. Tim, the chief executive, then stood up and he said, Rene, I didn't understand this inclusion thing. I understand it now. We have to change. We will become inclusive. So when you ask me that great question before, does it come organically to the chief executive? No. We have to create an environment where they can experience just how damaging exclusion can be. Because Tim, he was an advisor to the Chancellor of Germany. I'm not sure he's ever experienced exclusion. He did that day. And it was authentic, it was powerful. It hurt. I had to take a break after that because the mood music in the room, everyone felt it. Diversity is the science. Inclusion is the art. Diversity is the numbers. Inclusion is the heart. And what we need to do is let our hearts come out and touch those who are less fortunate than us. And what we've realised, Jasmine, is everyone gets inherited wealth. Not everyone understands inherited disadvantage. And that's where inclusion comes in.
It strikes me, Rene, as you speak, that your message actually is very simple of open your heart and lead with heart. But ironically, this language is not always taken seriously in the business world. Why is that? Why is this such a strange language?
EQ versus IQ. Leadership versus management. As we rise the ranks through business, we are rightly and correctly taught management. Strategy, systems, people's process, KPI, balance squad, all the things that if you don't do, you will go out of business. Measure, manage, check, risk. They are essential, they're the backbone of the business, but they're insufficient today. That's not enough to build a leading business. On the solid platform that management gives us, we have to build leadership. Purpose, vision, people, teams, culture. Purpose, vision, people, teams, culture. Management is the IQ, we think it, we touch it, we measure it. Leadership is the EQ. We feel it. We are it. It's not enough to have the right processes, the right measurements, the right systems. How do people feel when they turn up? Let's energize them, let's excite them. That's the leadership. So today we're increasingly hearing the EQ. And sometimes it's not just the emotional quotient, SQ, spiritual quotient. I heard the other day DQ, decency quotient. So we're starting to take it into areas where we care about how our people feel. And the great Maya Angelou quote, hardly anyone remembers exactly what you said. We all remember how you made them feel. That's the leadership bit. If we can, when Richard spoke to Denzel tried harder every day because of that. Because he knew Richard had his back. Richard cared about him. Tim, the chief executive at Deutsche, he changed. He now realised that people came from different backgrounds to him. And maybe he needed to make amends for that, allowances for that. Ensure that he didn't think that everyone was like him. Here's the live challenge that we see on this issue. 90% of the time when we come into the boardroom or the executive suite, we see a team that come from similar backgrounds, a team that get on well together, a team that similar education. We call it homogenous. It's beyond gender, it's beyond race, it's beyond ethnicity, they come from similar backgrounds. They see the world quite similarly. What that means for the leader is decision making so much easier because we think alike. And it means alignment is so much easier. But in March 2020, McKinsey and Company, the global consultancy, management consultancy, did some research that was a game changer. They looked at homogenous teams versus diverse teams. They proved over time that diverse teams brought a 36% financial improvement on business performance. The game has changed forever. However, that diverse team, and I mean all from different backgrounds, it's a lot harder to get to decisions. They're going to argue, creative abrasion, healthy tensions. They'll speak up, different points of view. The leader's got to work so much harder. Alignment. You may take you a couple of hours more, but it's worth it. The new ideas, the different angles, the creativity, the challenge. That 36%. So we're seeing it come in. Irrefutable, it will not be sent back, but it's going to take time. And our appeal is the classic homogenous, then diverse, then inclusive, trying to get to the promised land of belonging. We would say from homogenous, go to inclusive. Straight. Create a safe space. Enable people to feel as though they can bring their authentic selves to their place of work. Magic starts to happen. Business performance starts to shoot. When people feel trusted. The more I feel trusted, the more I go the extra mile. That's your business performance. What we've found is we do the right thing, inclusion, and believe you me, watch it drive your business performance. Then we've got the CEO. We've got them. Who can resist increased business performance? Especially with a workforce feeling fabulous about where they work. I don't understand why you wouldn't do it.
Rene, you said something on the stage at the Happiness Advantage. You said leaders are found. And I was reading last night that this was specific to women, but I'm sure it happens in other areas as well, that sometimes there's a broken rung between the hardest step is to go into management in the first place. And a lot of companies are not really looking out for leaders at that level, and that dries up the pipeline into C-suite. What's your thoughts on that?
Look, I agree with that. I've lived that myself. I've seen far too many talented people not being able to, that broken rung. I've seen far too many capable women, that last step. I'll tell you what, the bit I've seen that will change this game forever. Some research came out of Harvard a couple of years ago that to me just shook me to the core. It said mentees get a 16% career acceleration. We can all understand that. But it said mentors get a 53% career acceleration. They had my undivided attention. Me and my team just climbed into this and went out and proved they were right. And here's the solution to that broken rung. Everyone I coach, I encourage them to become a mentor and find a mentor. The easy one is go and find yourself a mentor. Someone who's been everything you would ever want to be, that's going to help you, coach you, be your sounding board, challenge you to be the best that you can. But the killer piece was go and be a mentor. You're ready. Go and find some people who are not like you, who come from a different background, very different. Go and mentor them. Here's what it forces. The first thing, you've got to create a safe space so they can speak up, because they're not used to talking to people like you. So you create that psychologically safe space. You get used to creating that psychologically safe space. It becomes part of your repertoire, your leadership repertoire. Second, learn to listen intentionally. Hear what's not being said. Hear what's being said. That changes you as a leader. Safe space, listen intentionally. Walk in their shoes. Understand what they see in the world and the barriers they see. Learn how to support and help them. Learn how to take ownership. They're going to get some things wrong. They're going to make some natural mistakes. How do you take ownership of that and give them the credit for all the things they do? Watch what that trust does to their performance. I could go on. It prepares you to, that broken rung you'll skip over as a leader. By learning, having the experience of mentoring those who come from different backgrounds, who you're going to have to change the way you lead. That broken rung becomes an opportunity, not an obstacle. Your leadership just 53% career acceleration. So for all of our listeners, do not forget this, all our listeners, don't forget this. Yes, be a mentee. Grab the 16% career acceleration. The career transformation, go out and be a mentor. Go find some people in your vicinity, not necessarily in your place of work, but maybe in your place of work. Help them. Advocate for them. Sponsor them. Coach them. Mentor them. You become the beneficiary.
That's incredible. I love that. And I'm also thinking about, there's some people listening who are leaders in HR, and they're probably thinking, yes, I get this, I know this, I feel this, but I feel alone. And my C-suite, they don't get it. The people leading the company don't get what I intuitively know. What would you say to them?
So look, this is the biggest challenge that we have today. The onus on the chief people officer, the head of HR, it's grown. Step number one, you're a leader. Act like one. You're not an expert. The expertise reports to you. You're head of talent, you're head of operations, you've got lots of people do the expertise. Push everything down. There's one thing you do. You lead. And your biggest job is to be a leader in the executive team. Whether you sit in that team or not, every time they see you, you're going to lead. You're going to coach. You're going to be the role model. You're going to have the language. You're going to support them. You're going to build a relationship with the chief executive where you're going to coach that chief executive to become an inclusive leader. And everything I've said today and more, it's not complex. Simplify it. Take them to places where they can see inclusion at work. Chief executives are smart. Like Richard, they'll pick it up in seconds. Like Tim, they'll get it in seconds. Then you become chief supporting actor to the chief executive for inclusion. park diversity, park talent, park all the other, give all the other things to your people. They can do it. This is the road to the Chief Executive's office. Inclusion, the ultimate game changer. The biggest driver of business performance we have seen. Story coming up. Bentley. Everyone knows Bentley. Bentley was bought by Volkswagen. For over 130 years, it was based in the northwest of England in a small town called Crewe. 4,000 people worked for Bentley. For years and years and years in the automotive industry, great-granddad, granddad, dad were all competent automotive engineers for Bentley. Heavily unionised. The unions hated management, the management hated the unions, but everyone loved Bentley. So there was this strange loyalty. Bentley started to fail. Volkswagen gave them 3 years to turn it around or they'll sell Bentley. Something happened drastic. The next generation of automotive engineers, the children of those who worked at Bentley, went to university, never came back. So that rich source of talent, automotive engineering, wasn't there. 70% of Bentley's workforce today is contract, through Adecco. They don't have that heritage, they don't have that love, they don't have that loyalty. They're smart, they're hard-working, but today, many of them are Irish, many are Eastern European, some are Afro-Caribbean, some are from Southern Asia. They want a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. There's no extra loyalty. They're not going to come in a little bit earlier. They're not going to go the extra mile. They don't go home and talk Bentley. The Chief Executive, Adrian, noticed this. There wasn't that extra loyalty he had before. So I went around to find out what's going to help him do that. The first thing he found out, these 70% contractors, they weren't like the engineers of life. Make a packed lunch at home with their sandwiches, have a little thermos flask with their tea or coffee, bring it in, sat outside with their colleagues and had lunch. No, they didn't wake up early to make their lunch. They wanted a Pret, they wanted a restaurant, they wanted a canteen. They'd never had one. At a time when trading is tough, Adrian fought his board really hard. They decided to build a restaurant. He'd listened to the people on the shop floor. The first day the restaurant opened, it was packed to the rafters. People were applauding, clapping. By the end of the week, the restaurant was empty. Adrian couldn't work this out. You told me you wanted it. When he walked around the shop floor again, he got the shock of his life. He realised he'd never experienced exclusion. The meals were £7 each. These contractors couldn't afford £7. Richard and his board colleagues, £7 was nothing. They didn't even notice it. For the first time it got to him. I am not walking in their shoes. He fought the board again. They dropped the price to £1 a meal. The restaurant was packed, but that was just a small bit. Performance in the factory went through the roof. Why? They knew Adrian and the board cared. They felt included. They felt they belonged. They came in a little earlier. They came up with some more ideas. They pushed. They now looked like the heritage automotive engineers. Walk in the shoes of those who are different to you. Experience what they experience. See what they see. The role of the head of HR, get experiences for the chief executive and their fellow executives. Don't lecture them, get them experiences. Create environments where they can listen to different people in the workforce. Take them out to the factories, take them out to different outposts, take them to where you're in different regions. Enable them to experience the power of inclusion and the danger of exclusion. Chief People Officer, Chief Inclusion Officer.
As you're talking right now, I just think of the HR leader that's listening to this, who's maybe doesn't feel so confident to be able to do this. And then I think spike. All HR leaders actually have very high empathy and they're very good at this. Could you bring that together?
That's a fantastic point. So look, what led us to write the book Spike, what got me really engrossed about it is we soon realised that no one is brilliant at everything, but everyone was brilliant at something. But the way the old performance appraisal system worked, it lent itself to trying to fix the things you're not so good at. We wondered whether we could fine-tune the things you're brilliant at, turn it upside down. Instead of a fixation on your limitations, what about an obsession with the things you're brilliant at, your strengths? So the strength-based revolution needs to hit the HR industry. I know you've got a bunch of skills, HR policy, HR practice. Let's not ignore that, they're important. But what got you into this profession in the first place? You care about people. You want the best environment for people. You want them to hit their potential. That gives you empathy. It gives you EQ. Use it. The good news is, the great news is, when it comes to IQ, the brains we were blessed with at birth, that ain't going to change much throughout your life. EQ, you can develop it, grow it. That's the new route to the top. The most empathetic, the person that cares most, the person that connects most, the person that can coach others to connect and care. I want those in HR who have not yet found their voice, who are still struggling to be accepted, to be listened to. Coach. Empathy coach. Do it in every conversation you have. Catch people doing things right. Enable them to see where they can be more empathetic, more compassionate, where they can care a little bit more. I think the best HR practitioners need to become the best coaches. I'm not saying to do official coaching sessions, but every conversation feels as though someone's been coached, they've been helped. Not been told, not been sent on a course, but being listened to, being cared for, demonstrating what everyone else could do. By being the best listener, the best communicators are actually the best listeners. Then they find their voice. Because everything you've said, if you've listened really well, will be listened to. You want an audience to listen? You listen first. If you hear them and play back what they've said, you watch how they feel about you. Let me share with you what I think I heard. And if you can hit a few points, they will come, they will follow you, they'll see you as someone that's vital to them, and they will see you as a leader. HR is not support, it's leadership.
I'm going to ask you a personal question now,
Yeah.
René.
Please.
One thing that inspired me when I first met you was this ability that you have to see other people's spikes. And you saw my spike when we met, and you helped me see my spike.
Mm-hmm.
How did you even realize this was important? There must have been some moments where you experienced this for yourself inside.
It's a great question, Yasmin. So the queen of all spikes givers, the person that understands it better than anyone else, is mothers at home. Mothers at home, every single minute of their life, having to work out what's the best approach to a variety of different stakeholders. Children, husband, aunt, grandfather, postman, all the variety of stakeholders that they meet. Mothers know precisely when to change their voice, their tone. Who needs an arm around them? Who needs a bit of a straight talk? Who needs sanctions? Who needs limitations? And they seem to do it intuitively. No, they've worked out everybody's spike. They've worked out, they're really good at this, so I'll get them to do that. They won't be any good at that, so I'm not going to ask them. And they do it intuitively. You want to watch a masterclass of how to analyse and find spikes, watch Mothers at Home. It's just so natural. So I watch that. How my mum, I was the one in the kitchen all the time. Not my sisters. I was the one beating cake, making mayonnaise, slicing onions, and it seemed odd, but I was the one who really liked it and enjoyed it. It's no surprise I became the best cook amongst the kids, but I was the one who was drawn to it. And the bit that the relationship that I think is the real telling one is the things I tend to enjoy are the things I tend to be really good at. The things I tend to be really good at are the things I tend to enjoy. And Mum getting me to do all the cooking and business and not my sisters. My dad found it odd at first. My mum found it natural. Now my mum's made me into someone who can cook and loves cooking. It's not more complex than that. Look for what people excel at and try and build their roles around what they do brilliantly. So we say, it's no longer the best person for the job, it's the best person for the team. If in our team, we don't really have a great communicator, I'm the leader, and that's the bit I hate most. I'm not good at standing up in front of people. Then in and amongst my team, I want someone who's got a spike of standing up in the stage and addressing people. I'm really good at the big picture, but sometimes I miss some of the details. Let me find two people in the team, no matter what their role is, who are going to pick up the detail. It's the team that becomes brilliant. I don't need to be brilliant at everything. I've got to find brilliant people. And I think that team that works for me, it may not be the team that works for you, Yasmin. We should be brave enough to accept that. And what I've found is, give someone a role that exposes their spikes continuously. First thing, the day flies. Second thing, who doesn't want to come into work and only do the things they're fantastic at? Who doesn't want to come into work and only do the things they're absolutely superb at? But the leader needs to understand that and create that environment. And you'll see Zach travels everywhere with me. He's my alter ego. Everything I'm rubbish at, he's brilliant at. So we are the perfect team. He sees things I'm never going to see. He spots the things, the glaring errors I make every day. I don't want to learn how to do that. I'm never going to be brilliant. I might be okay. I might be moderate at it. If you're going to focus on making a 5% improvement on something you do, don't waste it on something you're useless at. 5% increase on something that you're useless at doesn't make any difference. 5% increase on something you're already very good at is not just noticed by everyone. That's what you become famous for. That's your career accelerator. She is superb at problem solving. We'll get even better at it then. That's how you're going to get to the top. Strengths, strengths, strengths. Everyone is brilliant at something. No one is brilliant at everything. The trick is, find out what you're brilliant at, and quick.
Absolutely love that, René. That's so good. Someone very wise once told me, don't be a guru, be a mother. And yes. I think you're confirming that that's really, really good advice.
Mothers are amazing role models. And the thing is, there's no degree course that teaches motherhood. And they do things in a way that it's empathy. Now, things are changing. We're seeing men clumsily getting a bit better at it. There's no reason why we can't be. And a lot of it is the socialization processes of old. But if you really want a role model on empathy, today it's still mothers.
I mean, really, it's just sort of the strength of their love and genuine care, which is the ultimate
and their authenticity. They don't have to play to anyone. They are who they want to be. but it's a masterclass.
As I sort of use that word, love, it strikes me that it's just not a word that we use very commonly in the corporate world. And I just love your message that it's something I've felt intuitively for a long time, that actually it's from the heart that we need to lead.
We're humans. We're good at connecting with each other. The family units, the tribes, we're not here to be alone. I think the advice I'm giving to nearly everyone I'm coaching at the moment, be more compassionate than you think you need to be. Watch that return on investment. Take a moment and listen. Catch people doing things right. Yes, call it out. Inappropriate behaviour, a microaggression, people using the wrong language, call it out with care. Give them the opportunity to learn. Confrontation doesn't work. Blame, shame, guilt doesn't work. Be generous. Coach.
You say, René, that we're all seeking connection.
Yes.
But at the same time, sometimes the things we want the most are the things that we're most scared of.
Yes.
And sometimes, especially in leadership, it is lonely, and we get stuck in a little bubble and get scared to break out and use the compassion and empathy that is within us.
I can't tell you how often I see that. So, strange enough, we've coached 4 or 5 world championship boxers. Hang on a minute. What has world championship boxers got to do with chief executive? A lot, actually. They both feel they can't show their vulnerability. They both feel they need to be strong, correct, stand through it and never be wrong every day. Wrong. What we do for the boxing, the world champions, is show them that demonstrating their vulnerability is actually a strength, especially in their social lives. Save that for the ring. Outside the ring, you're human. They are the loneliest people in sports because they walk around wanting to be strong every day, nothing's wrong with me, and no one dares approach them. We coach them to be vulnerable, make connections, there's support everywhere. And we've seen the same thing with the chief executives. That's my career. My job is to sometimes break into that bubble, that film that's built around them, that defensive suit of armour. And we've found create a safe space even for the chief executive. Enable them to be human. Enable them to be cared for. Through that coaching, they take that as that becomes their job. They're the chief caring officer. If the chief executive starts off a meeting and says, how's everyone feeling today? How are your children? How was your weekend? It costs 10 minutes. Return on investment, then everyone does that in their team. Before we get down to business, let's just have a little check. I noticed that you didn't say much last week. Everything okay? Why don't we catch up for a coffee later? Guess how they feel? For a bit of humanity. So I just shared that story of Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was coming down to visit Barclays Africa in Johannesburg. I was coaching Maria Ramos, the chief executive, and her top team. He was coming from 9 till 11, and they'd prepared everything. I got there very early. I'm standing in the courtyard. It's about 8:30. There's a gardener's, security, there's a cleaners, everyone's out there as normal, when a limousine pulls up. The chauffeur opens the back door and out steps Nelson Mandela. What's he doing at 8:30? Should be 9 o'clock. He walks round the courtyard. He speaks to the cleaners, the gardeners, security, and me. I don't think I was breathing. As I shook his hand, he looked, and he had this incredible capability. I must have spoken to him for 30 seconds. He made me feel I was the most important person in his world at the moment. Got back in the car, drove off. I was pinching myself. Did that really happen? 9 o'clock, the car came back. They opened the door, he came in, red carpet, went in, disappeared for 2 hours. 11 o'clock, came back out, into the car, disappeared. 11:15, the car came back. Show from the door, out came Nelson Mandela. He came back and he spoke to each of the gardeners, the cleaners, security, and me. He remembered our names. When he said, "Hi, Rene, it's great to meet you." Guess how that made me feel? How complex is that? How difficult is that? The moral of the story. 150,000 people work for Barclays around the world. Within hours, one story was circulating everywhere. Nothing about what he said in the 2-hour meeting with executives. One simple story. He remembered everybody's name. He remembered everybody's name. The culture of Barclays changed that day, where leaders started to remember everybody's name. The humanization of leadership.
Never fails to land that story and touch your heart. Rene, we're coming to the end of our chat today, even though there's so many more things I'd love to ask you. But as you were sharing a couple of stories with me yesterday, I think what touched me the most was your own experiences of the lack of inclusivity. And as I think of Malta and all of our challenges with actually creating an inclusive culture, could you tell a story that would kind of really bring this home of how much we're missing out from being inclusive?
So, Richard, I spoke to you about before, Chief Executive of United Students. Richard, I was coaching him on to tell stories about inclusion. And we were in the middle of a board meeting at United Students, and Richard told this story. And I've never forgotten it because it touched everyone in the room. Every one of us has a story to share. Every one of us shouldn't be afraid for it to be deeply personal and sometimes deeply hurtful. And Richard was looking at me when he was telling this story. He said he was travelling on a double-decker bus with his 7-year-old daughter. And there was an elderly black woman sitting near the front of the bus on her own. And 4 young rowdy men jumped on the bus, climbed upstairs. He's sitting at the back with his daughter, and they went up the front and they started teasing this black woman on her own. It got louder and louder and louder, and no one said a word. She was petrified. She took her handbag and put it to her left to protect her from the noise they were making. They got louder, nastier, racist. No one said a word. It now started to get ugly. She was pressed up against the glass, really scared, and they're shouting at her, standing around her. Richard's 7-year-old daughter broke free from him and ran down the bus, confronted the 4 of them. "Leave her alone. You're racist. You're horrible. Leave her alone." As the bus pulled up at the next stop, they ran off. She walked back to Dad. Everyone on that bus was taught a lesson of leadership. Recent research tells us, or traditional research tells us, that British people, when they see an incident like that, we're more likely to say nothing. Worry about our own self-protection and walk the other way. Some recent research has told us something very different. It takes one brave person. If one person stands up, others will follow them. Richard's 7-year-old was that one brave person. You're never too young to lead. you're never too old to learn. We can change every community, every society. It starts with one brave person, you. The next time something untoward happens to someone who's different to you, who may not have a voice, who may not speak the language, who may not worship the way you do, who may not love the way you do, who may not be able to get up the way you can, take a moment and speak up for them. Take a moment and stand up for them. Others will follow you. That's the way we change society for the better.
Thank you so much, Rene. I mean, that is a really powerful message. Struggling to get my brain back in gear after the being touched so deeply by it. Wow, you've really shared some amazing nuggets of wisdom for both leaders and, well, for all leaders, right? In every title.
It's our mission, Yasmin, that diversity is scientific and can be complex. Inclusion isn't. It's compelling, it's straightforward. We can all practice it as of now. The returns are huge. And here, in a smaller place, a smaller island, we can build a better Malta.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rene. And thank you so much to all of our listeners. If this touched you, really appreciate you sharing it on. Hopefully it can inspire someone to believe in their own strengths and lean into their own strengths and open their heart in the spirit of inclusion. So
thank you very much, Yasmin. It's been a pleasure to be here.
And thank you so much. Till next time, everyone.